Welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to Mysteries from Beyond the Other Dominion. I'm your host, Dr. Franklin Rule, and today we're going to hunt for the lost continent of Atlantis, investigate the mysteries of Billy the Kid, tell you about the ghost of the Greenbrier Swamp, report on animals actually placed on trial, and ask, what destroyed the dinosaurs? But first, the enigma of Atlantis. Where was Atlantis located? Who were its people? And what caused its destruction? Plato simply wrote, in a single dreadful day and a single dreadful night, Atlantis disappeared into the sea. Possibly it was due to a volcano or a huge tidal wave. Another hypothesis is that the Atlanteans reached such a high level of technological accomplishment that they developed nuclear weapons and blew themselves to bits. Writing in the 4th century BC, Plato in his dialogues described Atlantis as being a fabulous land where the inhabitants were dedicated to materialism, wearing garments adorned with gold and silver, and living in elegant modern homes. However, he was not specific as to its location. He merely wrote that it was somewhere beyond the Pillars of Hercules at the Strait of Gibraltar, where Europe and Africa meet. Some have suggested it was the Greek island of Crete, others the Greek island of Skyros. Still others suggest it might have been Scandinavia, others that it was situated beside the Canary Islands near Spain, and yet others suggest that America might have been Atlantis. One intriguing hypothesis came from rocket engineer Otto Muck, who in his book, The Secret of Atlantis, argued that it was actually a confederation of islands in the mid-Atlantic near the Bahamas. This is based on the discovery of the so-called Bimini Road, a series of huge stone blocks on the ocean floor near Bimini that may be the remnants of Atlantis. Another intriguing hypothesis is that the Atlanteans were actually aliens from outer space who arrived here in UFOs and established a futuristic beachhead, then ultimately destroyed themselves. But whether terrestrial or extraterrestrial, some Atlanteans may have survived the Holocaust. They may have gone on to help build the pyramids in Egypt and in Central America. Or perhaps they exist today in some underwater base manning UFOs that come out of the ocean. When we return, the amazing ghost from the Greenbrier Swamp. Please stay tuned. Welcome back, and time now for the mysteries of Billy the Kid. But first, the trivia question of the day. Let me extricate it from its paper prison here. The question, what was Billy the Kid's height? The prize, the only prize for the correct answer, one pat on the back. Of course, only if you get that answer correct. I'll take a sip of water and be back momentarily. Okay, time is up. Again, what was Billy the Kid's height? Billy was only 5'3" and weighed just 125 pounds. In other words, he was nothing but a twerp. Now, there's several mysteries concerning his life. For example, we're not certain where he was born or when he was born. It's believed it was New York City in 1860. Also, we're not sure of his true name or who his father was. Apparently, he was christened Henry, but took on the name of Billy. One myth claims that he killed his first man at age 14 in revenge for an insult to his mother, but that's not true at all. When Billy was 17, a bully blacksmith had been taunting him and even jumped on him trying to beat him to death, so Billy pulled out his gun and shot the wretch to death. That was his first killing, and it was not a face-to-face draw. He then became involved in the famous and bloody Lincoln County Range Wars. In a massive shootout, it's possible he killed anywhere from 1 to 3 individuals, but he escaped unscathed. He became a rustler, but he cheated his partners of $800 they got on their first haul. He gave one a generous $30, the other a stolen pair of boots. In 1879, he surrendered and was granted amnesty by Governor Lew Wallace. But this time, the DA double-crossed Billy and tried to sentence him to prison. He again escaped. One reason he was able to escape so many times from prison was because he had very narrow wrists, so he could extricate himself easily from handcuffs. Now, an old friend of his had become elected sheriff. He was a bartender named Pat Garrett, who was very deft at capturing outlaws such as Billy. Billy sought refuge at the ranch of a former pal. One night, while hiding in the bunkhouse, he became very hungry. So bootless and hatless, Billy went to the front building. But waiting for him was Pat Garrett, who shot him twice on the spot. The first bullet killed Billy. He died without his boots on. Now, we've heard many reports that Billy the Kid killed 21 men during his lifetime. No way. It was closer to 8 or 9, and never in a face-to-face confrontation. There you have the truth about Billy the Kid. Turning now to the Greenbrier Swamp and reports of a mysterious ghost haunting this cold, bleak region. On a recent dark night, 2 teenagers were driving through the Greenbrier Swamp in Maryland. They came across a hideous sight. Trapped in their headlights stood the headless ghost of a woman who carried her head under her arm. This ghost is known as Big Liz, and legends of her haunting the Greenbrier Swamp date back to the Civil War. A wealthy and miserly plantation owner, fearful that the Yankees would burn down his plantation and seize his property, decided to hide a large cache of gold in the swamp. But the trunk proved too heavy for him to carry by himself, so he ordered a slave woman, Big Liz, to help him. As her name would suggest, she was a large and robust individual. One dark night, Big Liz dragged the trunk of gold into the swamp for the plantation owner. She even dug a deep hole in the ground to bury the treasure. But as she reached down to throw the last shovelful of dirt on the mound, the plantation owner sneaked up behind her and sliced off her head with his sword, so that no one would know the location of his treasure. The miser never did make it back to his treasure. Not long after, he was thrown from his horse and killed. And a few years later, Big Liz began to appear in the swamp. A few years after that, the ghost of Big Liz began to be seen, a decapitated corpse carrying her own head. Today it's said you can summon Big Liz simply by flashing your auto headlights 3 times and honking your horn loudly 6 times. The question, is she seeking vengeance, or does she want to lead you to the treasure? And my question to you, if you saw Big Liz, would you dare follow her into the swamp to find that treasure? Now for amazing cases of animals on trial. Actually, the practice of putting animals on trial appears to date back to biblical times. For example, the book of Exodus, chapter 21, verse 28, says that if an ox gores a man or a woman to death, he will be stoned to death. In the year 1394 in France, a pig killed and ate a man. His sentence, death. In the year 1547, a mother pig known as a sow and her piglets actually killed and ate another man. During the trial, the mother pig was sentenced to death, but the piglets were acquitted. In the year 1471 in Basel, Switzerland, a chicken laid a brightly colored egg. They thought it was bewitched and gave it the death sentence. In 1499, a bear clawed a man to death. He was put on trial and even given a defense attorney. That attorney demanded that a jury of the bear's peers be called forth. In other words, bears on the jury. His request was denied and the bear executed. In 1639 in Dijon, France, a horse trampled its owner. It also received the death penalty. And more recently, in 1922, a dog was sentenced to death in the state of Pennsylvania simply because it belonged to an illegal immigrant. At the last moment, President Warren G. Harding commuted the poor pooch's sentence. So there you have it, bizarre cases of animals on trial. When we return, the amazing jelly bag UFO case. Please stay tuned. Welcome back, and time now for the case of the jelly bag UFO. Dateline, December 20th, 1958. Two men, Hans Gustafsson and Stig Rydberg, were riding a truck about 3 in the morning from Höganäs to Helsingborg. They came to a clearing in the thick forest that lines both sides of the highway. They saw a mysterious shimmering light of changing colors before them. They stopped their vehicle and decided to investigate. That's where they made their big mistake. Those lights were not coming from any terrestrial vehicle, but rather from a UFO. Specifically, it was a saucer-shaped craft. It was resting on a tripod about 2 feet high. But that wasn't the most unusual aspect of this case. No, outside of the UFO, moving about it, were giant jelly bag-like creatures. They looked like giant protozoa. They were emitting a bluish light. They appeared to be moving like titanic bags of some sort of jelly-like material. The Swedes attempted to get back to their vehicle, but they were surrounded by these creatures and were being physically enveloped by them. One man, Hans, held onto a tree trying to prevent himself from being engulfed by the creatures. The other man, Stig, said that one had engulfed his entire right arm. He struggled to free himself and finally managed to wrench his arm away. He ran over to the truck and hit the horn in the desperate hope that someone might hear the blare. No one came, but fortunately for the two men, the sound disturbed and frightened the jelly bag creatures. They retreated to the safety of their spacecraft and dropped Hans, who was barely able to hold on for dear life. The object then suddenly ascended, emitting both a brilliant light and an ear-piercing whistle. I should have mentioned that those jelly bag entities were also emitting a terrible stench that Stig and Hans described as a combination of ether and burnt sausage. For 3 days, they postponed going to the authorities, then finally told their story. They took them out to the site where they saw the UFO, and fortunately for them, there was still a tripodal indentation in the ground where they had seen that bizarre entity from outer space. This certainly counts as one of the oddest cases in the annals of ufology. Now, the Strategic Air Command, or SAC, is our nation's first line of defense against an enemy invasion. They have a museum in Bellevue, Nebraska. So we sent our intrepid reporter, Dennis, out there to find out what they have there. Take it away, Dennis!
Thank you, Dr. Rule. I'm here at the Strategic Air Command Museum in Bellevue, Nebraska. Behind me, the Atlas Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, capable of traveling over 6,300 miles at an amazing speed of 18,000 miles per hour. This museum is sort of a history of bombs and bombers. Let's take a look. Behind me is Thor, the free world's first operational intermediate-range ballistic missile. First developed in 1956, it was mostly used at Cape Canaveral as the first stage of the Pioneer moon rockets. As a matter of fact, all the missiles behind me were at one time used by Strategic Air Command, but these are ground-based operational systems. When I think of bombers, I think of bomb bay doors and giant aircraft. Well, they have those here too. As a matter of fact, just about every aircraft used in combat from World War II to the present is on display here at the museum. Everything from the gigantic B-52 bomber to the super-fast Air Force jets to this little puppy, the McDowell XF-85 Goblin. Now this little puppy was designed as a parasite escort fighter, which means it was housed inside the larger bombers and then set free for about 15 minutes to shoot things up and then return to the same bomber in flight. Unfortunately, this return part didn't always work out too well. Now what about the bombs that these giant aircrafts dropped? Well, they're on display inside. Behind me is some of the original equipment used in the old underground command post. If there was a nuclear attack, this is where the scramble would begin. Well, that's about it, Dr. Rule, from the Strategic Air Command Museum. Back to you.
Thank you, Dennis. Another excellent report. Hopefully, we'll never have to use those SAC bombers. Now turning to Puerto Rico in the case of Roberto Clemente. Back in 1972, Clemente, the great right fielder for the Pittsburgh Pirates, had just collected his 3,000th hit at the end of the season. A few months later, a series of earthquakes struck Nicaragua in December. He had played winter baseball down there and had a special feeling for those people. He actually is a great humanitarian and started to gather aid. By December 31st, he had a plane full of goods to take down there. He's scheduled to take off about 9 p.m. However, Manny Sanguillen, another pirate player, a man who regarded Clemente as his father figure, had a terrible premonition that Clemente would die in a fiery plane crash off the coast of Puerto Rico. So he drove at breakneck speed to warn him. Terribly, his car broke down before he could get to the airport. At 9 p.m., that plane took off and moments later crashed into the ocean. All aboard died. Now, of course, we do not know if Roberto Clemente would have heeded the warning of his good friend. And my question to you is this: if a friend or relative told you they had a premonition about danger involving you, would you pay attention or laugh it off? Think about that, and when we return, we'll investigate the death of the dinosaurs. Please stay tuned. Welcome back, and now to probe the question, what caused the death of the dinosaurs? One theory is that a huge comet, meteor, or asteroid slammed into our planet, such as in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. This not only destroyed some dinosaurs in the immediate vicinity of the explosion, but more importantly, caused an enormous dust cloud to engulf our atmosphere, which blocked out impinging sunlight, leading to what's been called a nuclear winter in modern terms. This lowered the temperatures, destroying vegetation and some dinosaurs. Since 3/4 of the dinosaurs were herbivores, this left them without a source of food and they died off. The remaining 1/4 of the dinosaurs, being predators, had nothing to eat because their prey had died. Another theory is that volcanic activity on a global basis caused the blackening of the atmosphere. It may have been triggered by a comet, asteroid, or meteor, or perhaps by widespread geothermal instability. Either way, it would have meant the death of the dinosaur. And I should point out these are just two theories concerning the demise of these mighty beasts. In future episodes, we'll probe other possible causes. Incidentally, if you have seen anything amazing or have some surprising film footage for us, call us on our toll-free 800 number. That's 1-800-45-RUEHL, RUEHL. Now, until next time, may the power of the universe be with you, be with you, be with you, be with you, be with you.